Jack Bennett stood at the observation deck of Lunar Base Alpha, his eyes fixed on the strange ship hovering above Earth. Even from the moon, the alien vessel looked massive, its silver hull reflecting sunlight in ways that made it seem almost alive. After 30 years as a Navy pilot and 5 more running asteroid mining operations, Jack thought nothing could surprise him anymore. He was wrong. "They're actually here," whispered Lisa Winters, who stood beside him. Her hands trembled slightly as she clutched her tablet. As Earth's leading xenolinguist, she had spent her entire career preparing for this moment. Real aliens. Jack nodded slowly. And they picked a hell of a time to show up. Earth wasn't at its best. Climate recovery was still ongoing, and the HFY political situation remained fragile even 20 years after the resource wars. But humanity had finally established permanent bases on the Moon and Mars. They had even begun harvesting asteroids. Progress, but still nothing compared to the beings who had just arrived. "The Secretary General wants us in the meeting room," Lisa said, checking her messages. The aliens agreed to send down representatives. Jack sighed. Since his wife, Ellen, had died last year from Kramer's disease, he had thrown himself into work, avoiding anything that reminded him of his loss. Now, as part of Earth's space operations leadership, he couldn't avoid being dragged into first contact. "Let's not keep our new friends waiting," he said. The meeting room on Lunar Base Alpha had been hastily converted for diplomatic purposes. Earth's most brilliant minds and highest-ranking officials gathered around the table, nervously adjusting their clothes and checking their notes. Jack felt out of place among the scientists and politicians, but Director Harris had insisted he attend as a representative of Earth's space capabilities. Lisa sat near the front, surrounded by linguistic, reference materials, and communication devices. Her life's work was about to be tested. The room fell silent when the doors opened. 3 aliens entered, their movements graceful despite Earth's gravity settings. They stood nearly 7 feet tall with blue-gray skin that seemed to shimmer. Their 4 eyes, too large and too small, scanned the room with what Jack thought might be disappointment. "Welcome to Earth's Lunar Base Alpha," began Secretary General Patel. "We are honored by your presence and look forward to establishing peaceful relations between our peoples." The translator device Lisa had helped develop hummed as it processed the words. After a moment, one of the aliens responded in a series of musical clicks and hums. The lead alien, who identified himself as Commander Zexteral of the Nuvarian Central Command, waited for the translation to finish before speaking again. This time, the translation came through clearly. "We acknowledge your greeting. The Galactic Confederation has authorized preliminary contact with your species following detection of your primitive interplanetary activities." Jack frowned at the word primitive, but kept quiet. Lisa leaned forward eagerly. "We have so many questions about your civilization, your technology, your history." Zexteral raised a 6-fingered hand, cutting her off. "You misunderstand the purpose of this meeting. This is not a cultural exchange. We are here to catalog your development level and establish appropriate protocols." The room grew uncomfortably quiet. "Catalog our development level?" asked Director Harris. "Yes," said Zexteral. "Based on our initial assessment, humanity registers as a Tier 7 developmental species. This grants you limited trading rights within your solar system, but restricts access to advanced technology that could destabilize your natural evolutionary path." Secretary General Patel stood straighter. "With all due respect, Commander, we had hoped for a more open exchange. Earth has much to offer." "Earth has little that interests the Confederation," interrupted Zexteral. His smaller eyes blinked rapidly, which Jack guessed might be their version of impatience. "Your technological development is approximately 300 standard cycles behind minimum Confederation membership requirements." Jack couldn't stay silent any longer. "And what if we need that technology? We have diseases that—" "Your biological challenges are part of your development path," Zexteral stated flatly. "Interference would violate Confederation guidelines." Jack thought of Ellen, wasting away from a disease that apparently these aliens could have cured with their eyes closed. His hands clenched into fists under the table. Over the next 3 hours, Earth's representatives tried to negotiate better terms. They offered art, music, philosophy, unique biological samples, anything that might interest the aliens. But the Nuvarians remained unmoved. They would establish a small outpost on Mars for monitoring purposes. Limited trade would be permitted. No significant technology would be shared. As the meeting ended, Lisa approached Zexataral with one final question. When might Earth be reconsidered for a higher tier status? The alien looked down at her, all four eyes blinking slowly. At your current developmental pace, perhaps in 2 or 3 of your centuries. Though frankly, few species advance beyond their initial classification. With that, the aliens departed, leaving the room in stunned silence. 6 months later, Jack watched from his office window as alien ships moved materials to build their Mars outpost. The initial excitement of first contact had faded into bitter disappointment for most of humanity. The aliens barely acknowledged human ships, responding to communications with automated messages that felt like brushing away an annoying insect. Lisa entered his office without knocking, something she'd been doing more often since they'd started working together to understand the aliens. They rejected another request for medical technology exchange, she said, dropping a tablet on his desk. And they've denied our application to observe their FTL drive systems. Jack wasn't surprised. They think we're cavemen with rockets, Lisa. We're not worth their time. It doesn't make sense, she said, pacing the room. They have technology that could solve our biggest problems, clean energy, disease, food production, and they won't share any of it because of some arbitrary development. Tier. Jack looked out the window again. It's not about development, it's about power. They don't want competition. Lisa stopped pacing. So what do? We do what humans have always done when the odds are stacked against us, Jack said, his voice hardening. We find another way. That evening, Jack made a call to Dr. Alan Parker, an old friend who worked in reverse engineering. If the Confederation wouldn't share their technology willingly, humans would have to learn it themselves. The aliens might see humans as primitive, but they had never faced human determination before. As he ended the call, Jack looked at a photo of Ellen on his desk. They ignore us now, he whispered. But someday they'll have no choice but to notice us. Outside his window, the stars shone coldly in the vacuum of space, indifferent to the small planet the Confederation had so casually dismissed. But changes were already beginning. Small workshops analyzing alien garbage, secret meetings between nations previously at odds, and a new sense of human unity in the face of cosmic indifference. The Confederation had made a critical error. They had wounded humanity's pride, and in their arrogance they had failed to recognize the danger in that. Humans, throughout their bloody history, had always been at their most innovative and their most dangerous when backed into a corner. 5 years had passed since the aliens arrived. The small Nuvarian outpost on Mars had grown into a modest base with regular supply ships coming and going. For the most part, the aliens kept to themselves, their earlier promises of limited trade, amounting to little more than allowing humans to sell them raw materials at prices that felt insulting. Dr. Alan Parker wiped sweat from his forehead as he carefully examined the alien device under his microscope. The lab, hidden beneath an old mining facility in Nevada, was hot and cramped but necessary for secrecy. What Parker was doing wasn't exactly illegal. The Confederation had never explicitly forbidden humans from studying their technology, but he knew they wouldn't approve. Any progress? Asked Jack Bennett, who had just arrived from Lunar Base Alpha. 5 years had added gray to his hair and lines to his face, but also a hardness to his eyes that hadn't been there before. Alan looked up from his work. I think I finally understand how their power cells work. It's not fusion like we thought. It's something else entirely. Something that creates energy from what they call void space. Jack nodded, trying to follow. Though not a scientist himself, he had learned a lot in these 5 years. Can we copy it? Not yet, but I'm getting closer. Alan gestured to the salvaged components spread across his workbench. These parts came from their garbage, Jack. Their literal trash is centuries ahead of our best technology. Jack's phone buzzed. A message from Maria Rodriguez, now a colonel in the newly formed United Earth Intelligence Service. She rarely reached out unless something was important. "I need to take this," Jack said, stepping into the hallway. Colonel Rodriguez's face appeared on the screen, her expression serious as always. "We've detected unusual activity around the Mars outpost. Their ships are moving in formation patterns we haven't seen before." "Military exercises?" Jack asked. "That's my guess, but when our observation satellite got too close, they destroyed it, claimed it was an accident." Jack frowned. In 5 years of coexisting with the Nuvarians, they had been dismissive and arrogant, but never openly hostile. "There's something else," Maria continued. "One of our deep space monitoring stations picked up transmissions between their Mars base and somewhere beyond Neptune. They're using a new encryption, but we caught fragments. They mentioned something called the Void multiple times." "The Void," Jack repeated. The term triggered a memory from one of Alan's reports about the alien power source drawing energy from void space. "I'll look into it," Jack promised. "Keep monitoring their movements." When Jack returned to the lab, Alan was still working, but now Lisa Winters had joined him. She had aged well these past 5 years, though stress had left its mark in the small lines around her eyes. As Earth's primary liaison with the aliens, she carried the burden of their constant condescension. "Lisa," Jack greeted her. "Surprised to see you here." She smiled tightly. "I'm officially on a cultural research trip to the American Southwest. Unofficially, I brought you something." From her bag, she pulled a small device, roughly the size of a smartphone but with an iridescent surface that shifted colors as it moved. Alan's eyes widened. "Is that—" "A Nuvarian data pad," she confirmed. "One of their junior officers left it behind after our last meeting. I managed to retrieve it before anyone noticed." Alan took it reverently. "This could advance our research by years." Jack studied Lisa's face. "What changed? You've always been careful about following their rules." Lisa's expression hardened. "Last week, I asked Commander Zexitoral about medical technology again. A hospital in Kenya had just lost 30 children to a new variant of mesh syndrome. Do you know what he said? Population control is a natural developmental challenge for Tier 7 species." The room fell silent. "There's more," Jack said after a moment sharing what Maria had told him about the strange activities on Mars. Lisa wasn't surprised. "They've been acting strangely for months. More ships arriving, higher-ranking officers. They used to barely acknowledge me at meetings. Now, they ask questions about Earth's defense capabilities, resource distribution, population centers." "That doesn't sound good," Alan muttered. "It gets stranger," Lisa continued. "Yesterday I was scheduled to meet with their cultural attaché. When I arrived, I found someone else instead. An alien trader who definitely wasn't Nuvarian. He called himself Voknar." Jack raised an eyebrow. "Another species?" "Yes. Shorter, reddish skin, 6 eyes instead of 4. He claimed to be an Aurelian from a trading world on the edge of Confederation space. He said he wasn't supposed to be meeting with me, but he wanted to make a private arrangement." "What kind of arrangement?" Alan asked, looking up from the datapad. "Technology for resources. Not the basic stuff the Confederation allows, but real technology. Medical equipment, energy systems, even ship components." Lisa paused. He seemed nervous. Kept looking over his shoulder, saying something about time running short. Jack felt a chill run down his spine. "Did he mention anything about the Void?" Lisa's eyes widened. "Yes. He said that's why he was here. Why so many Confederation ships were suddenly in our system." "How did you know?" Before Jack could answer, Alan made a startled sound. He had managed to activate the datapad and was staring at the screen. "What is it?" Jack asked, moving closer. "It's a tactical display," Alan said slowly. "These are ship movements, fleet positions." He pointed to symbols arranged in a pattern. "This isn't just our solar system. This is showing at least 20 star systems, and look, These red symbols are advancing across all of them. Lisa leaned in. Can you translate any of the text? Some of it, Alan said, tapping the screen. This word keeps appearing. In their language, it roughly translates to enemy or adversary, and here, he pointed to another symbol. This definitely says the void. Jack looked between his two friends. The Confederation is at war. That's why they're building up forces in our system. But they haven't told us anything, Lisa said. Why keep it secret? Because we don't matter, Jack replied bitterly. We're just a Tier 7 species, remember? Not worth informing about a galactic war that might reach our doorstep. The implications hung heavy in the air. Humanity had spent 5 years feeling insulted by the aliens' dismissal. Now that dismissal might prove dangerous. We need to accelerate. Everything, Jack decided. Research, development, our own ships. If there's a war coming and the Confederation isn't going to protect us, we need to be ready to protect ourselves. Alan nodded grimly. I'll contact our other research cells. With this data pad, we can make real progress. And I'll arrange a
meeting with Vaknar, Lisa added. If he's willing to trade real technology, we need to take advantage before it's too late.
As they spoke, none of them noticed the small light on the alien data pad blinking rhythmically, a tracking beacon, signaling their location to anyone who might be listening. In orbit around Mars, aboard the Nuvarian command vessel, a junior officer approached Commander Zexit Toral with news that a missing data pad had been activated. On Earth, in an unauthorized location. For the first time, the commander looked at the human world with something other than dismissal. Perhaps these primitive creatures required closer observation after all. The alarm blared through Lunar Base Alpha, its harsh sound jerking Jack Bennett from a rare deep sleep. Red emergency lights flashed across his small quarters as he fumbled for his communicator. Bennett here, what's happening? Sir, you need to get to the command center immediately. The voice of his second-in-command was tight with tension. Something's attacking the Nuvarian outpost on Mars. Jack dressed quickly and rushed through corridors filled with confused personnel. When he reached the command center, the large view screen showed chaos. Massive ships with dark, angular hulls fired upon the Nuvarian base. The alien vessels that had seemed so impressive to humans 5 years ago now looked small and fragile against these new attackers. When did this start? Jack asked, joining Colonel Maria Rodriguez, who stood watching with narrow eyes. 20 minutes ago, no warning. Those ships just appeared near Phobos and opened fire. She pointed to a section of the screen where Nuvarian vessels were returning fire. The Confederation forces are fighting back, but they're outnumbered. Have they communicated with us? Maria shook her head. Not a word, still ignoring us even while fighting in our backyard. Lisa Winters burst into the room, her face pale. I just lost contact with my liaison at the Nuvarian outpost. They watched in silence as the battle raged. The Nuvarian ships fought well, but the attackers, ships Jack assumed belonged to the Void, used strange tactics. They seemed to absorb energy from weapons fire, growing stronger with each hit. Within an hour, half the Nuvarian fleet was destroyed. We should evacuate Earth's major cities, Jack said suddenly. If those ships decide to come here next, a massive explosion lit up the screen. The Nuvarian base on Mars erupted in flames visible even from orbit. Moments later, debris from the battle began raining down on the planet. Too late, Maria whispered. Some of that debris is going to hit Earth. Jack grabbed the communications console. This is Director Bennett. I need all Earth defense systems activated now. We have incoming debris from the Mars battle. This is not a drill. For the next several hours, they watched with horror as chunks of alien ships entered Earth's atmosphere. Most burned up, but some were too large. The largest piece, part of what had been a Void battleship, crashed into the Pacific Ocean, creating a tsunami that devastated coastal areas of Japan, the Philippines, and parts of China. Smaller impacts hit land, one in Brazil, another in Russia, and a third just outside Chicago. By morning, the death toll had reached the thousands. The Confederation ships are retreating, Maria reported, her voice hollow. They're abandoning the solar system. Jack stared at her in disbelief. They're running away. leaving us to face these void ships alone? Before Maria could respond, a new alert sounded. A transmission was coming in from the lead void ship. "Put it on screen," Jack ordered. The view screen flickered, showing a figure that made everyone in the room take a step back. It was humanoid, but wrong somehow. Its skin like liquid darkness that never stopped moving, its eyes glowing with cold, white light. When it spoke, the translation system struggled to keep up with its strange language. "Inhabitants of the third planet," the figure said. "Your system is now claimed by the Void. Surrender your resources and accept our dominion or face extinction." The transmission cut off. "They think we're with the Confederation," Lisa realized. "They don't know the difference." "Or don't care," Jack said grimly. The door to the command center slid open, and a young officer entered. "Sir, we just received a message from Admiral Hayes. He says it's time to launch the fleet." Jack's heart raced. For 3 years, under the guise of a solar system defense initiative, Earth had been secretly building ships. Using technology reverse-engineered from alien garbage and traded from Vaknar, they had constructed vessels that weren't as advanced as Confederation ships, but were far beyond what Earth could have built alone. The project had been kept hidden from the Nuvarians, who would have shut it down immediately if they'd discovered it. Now, it seemed, the secret fleet was Earth's only hope. "Tell Hayes to proceed," Jack ordered, "and get me a shuttle to the EDF Phoenix. I need to be up there." 2 hours later, Jack stood on the bridge of the Earth Defense Force flagship Phoenix, watching as 48 Earth ships moved into formation. They were smaller than either the Confederation or Void vessels, but they were armed with weapons that Dr. Parker and his team had developed based on alien tech. Most importantly, they were crewed by humans who had everything to lose if Earth fell. "The Void ships are moving toward Earth," reported the tactical officer. 3 capital ships and 12 support vessels. "They're not expecting resistance," Admiral John Hayes said from the command chair. He was a tall man with a weathered face who had commanded nuclear submarines before taking charge of Earth's secret fleet. "They think we're defenseless." "Let's prove them wrong," Jack said. Hayes nodded. "All ships attack pattern Delta. Target their lead vessel first." The Earth fleet moved with surprising speed, closing the distance to the Void ships before they could properly react. The Phoenix fired first, its main cannon releasing a beam of concentrated energy that struck the lead Void ship. Unlike the Nuvarian weapons, which the Void ships had absorbed, this energy seemed to disrupt their hulls. "Direct hit," the tactical officer announced. "Their shields are fluctuating." "All ships continue the attack," Hayes ordered. "Don't give them time to recover." The Earth fleet swarmed the Void ships like angry bees, striking from multiple angles. The Void vessels, caught by surprise, struggled to respond. They had expected easy prey, not organized resistance. On a residential street in Boston, a young engineer named Kate Foster stood in the ruins of her home staring at the sky. Her husband and daughter had been killed when debris from the space battle hit their neighborhood. Now she watched as flashes of light appeared above, signs of a new battle being fought in orbit. Through her tears, she watched humanity's first space battle unfold. Whatever happened next, nothing would ever be the same. Aboard the Phoenix, Jack gripped the console as the ship shook from a direct hit. "Damage report," Hayes called. "Hull breach on deck 7. Shields at 60%, came the response. "Keep firing," Hayes ordered. "We can't let them reach Earth." The battle raged for hours, more intense than anything Jack had imagined. 3 Earth ships had been destroyed, but they'd managed to cripple one of the Void's capital ships. Then, just as the tide seemed to be turning against them, new ships appeared on their sensors. "Confederation vessels incoming," the tactical officer reported. "A lot of them." The largest ship hailed them. When the transmission came through, Jack was shocked to see Grand Marshal Kilvax of the Confederation forces. The alien looked haggard, his usually perfect uniform disheveled. "Humans," Kilvax said, his 4 eyes widening at the sight of Earth's fleet. "You have ships?" "Yes," Jack replied simply. "We do." The alien commander seemed at a loss for words. Finally, he straightened. "We have returned to assist in your defense against the void." "Returned?" Jack couldn't keep the bitterness from his voice. "You ran away." "A tactical retreat to gather reinforcements," Kilvax insisted. "Now perhaps we can coordinate our efforts?" Hayes and Jack exchanged glances. The Confederation needed them now, a shocking reversal. "We'll coordinate," Hayes said finally. "But this time we fight as equals." Kilvax hesitated, then nodded. "As equals." The combined fleets turned to face the remaining void ships. For the first time in history, humans fought alongside aliens not as inferiors, but as partners. The war had come home, and humanity was no longer being ignored. Captain Frank Miller watched from the bridge of the EDF Defiance as the combined Human Confederation fleet regrouped. The battle had been won, but at a cost. 7 Earth ships destroyed, 13 damaged, and nearly 500 human lives lost. The Confederation losses were even higher. Still, they had driven off the Void forces, for now. "Incoming transmission from the Phoenix," his communications officer said. Jack Bennett's face appeared on screen. He looked tired but determined. "Miller, we need you at the strategy meeting on the Confederation command ship. Your tactics against the 3rd Void vessel saved half our fleet." Frank nodded. Before joining Earth's secret space force, he had been a guerrilla warfare specialist with the Marines. Space battles weren't so different, just a matter of finding the enemy's weak points and hitting them where they least expected it. "I'll be there," he replied. An hour later, Frank sat in a large chamber aboard the Confederation flagship, surrounded by alien commanders who just days ago wouldn't have acknowledged his existence. Now they looked at him with what he thought might be respect, or at least curiosity. Grand Marshal Kilvax entered, followed by Jack and Admiral Hayes. Behind them came a younger Nuvarian who looked strikingly similar to Commander Zexatoral. "This is Subcommander Zexalorax," Kilvax introduced the younger alien. "Commander Zexatoral's offspring. He will serve as our liaison with Earth forces." Zexalorax bowed slightly. "Your ships fought unexpectedly well." Frank wasn't sure if that was a compliment, but he nodded anyway. "The situation is grave," Kilvax began without further pleasantries. "The Void has launched a massive offensive across multiple sectors. Their main fleet is still 2 cycles, about 20 Earth days, away, but these advanced forces will be reinforced soon." "What exactly are we fighting?" Hayes asked the question that had been on every human's mind. "Who or what is the Void?" Kilvax hesitated, then activated a holographic display. It showed a dark region of space where stars seemed to be going dark. They emerged from uncharted space beyond the Confederation's outer rim 2 years ago. We know little about them except that they consume everything in their path: energy, resources, even the fabric of space itself. They do not communicate except to demand surrender. "You've been fighting them for 2 years without telling us?" Jack's voice was sharp. "Your world was not considered relevant to the conflict," Zexalorax admitted. "Well, we're relevant now," Frank said. "Indeed." Kilvax looked uncomfortable. "We underestimated both the Void's advance and your species' capabilities. The weapons your ships used, they were effective in ways our own were not." "Dr. Susan Clark's work," Jack explained. "She developed them based on principles Dr. Parker discovered." As if on cue, the door slid open and Dr. Susan Clark entered. A brilliant weapons designer, she had taken alien technology and reimagined it in ways the aliens themselves had never considered. "Sorry I'm late," she said. "I was examining the sensor data from the battle." She didn't wait for permission to access the holographic controls, bringing up her own display. "The Void ships absorb energy along specific frequencies. That's why Confederation weapons were less effective. They operate precisely on those frequencies." "And yours do not?" Zexalorax asked, leaning forward with interest. "No. We modulated our energy weapons to fluctuate between frequencies, making them harder to absorb." Susan highlighted sections of the display. "But that's not all. Their ships have a structural weakness here and here, points where their energy absorption system connects to their propulsion. Frank smiled slightly. This was why humanity had survived for so long against overwhelming odds. When faced with superior force, they found the weak points and exploited them. "We need to share this information with all our ships," Kilvax said, "and we would welcome your input on our battle plans." Back on Earth, Kate Foster walked through the temporary laboratory that had been set up in what was once a shopping mall. After losing her family, she had volunteered her engineering skills to the war effort. Now she worked alongside dozens of other engineers and scientists, adapting alien technology for human use. "Ms. Foster," called a voice. She turned to see Lisa Winters approaching. "Your shield modulator designs have been approved. They want to start production immediately." Kate nodded. Her design would help protect Earth cities from further debris or possible attack. It wouldn't bring back her husband or daughter, but it might save other families. "There's something else," Lisa added. "The Confederation has finally agreed to share their medical technology with us. Dr. Parker thinks they might be able to adapt it to treat Kramer's disease." "Jack Bennett's wife died of that," Kate said, remembering the stories she'd heard. "Yes, too late for Ellen, but not too late for thousands of others." Lisa's expression was grim but satisfied. Amazing how quickly the aliens decided to share when they needed our help. In orbit around Jupiter, Captain Miller's ship, the Defiance, moved silently among the gas giant's many moons. Intelligence suggested the Void was using the area to gather resources, and Frank had volunteered to investigate. "Contact," his sensor officer whispered. "3 Void harvester ships approaching Europa." "Ready weapons," Frank ordered quietly. "But hold fire until my command." The Defiance was smaller than most Earth or Confederation warships, but it was fast and heavily armed for its size. Frank had worked with Dr. Clark to modify its weapons with the latest frequency-shifting technology. "They're deploying some kind of drilling equipment on Europa's surface," the sensor officer reported. Frank studied the tactical display. The Void ships were focused on their harvesting operation. Their sensors pointed toward the moon rather than scanning for threats. "Move us behind Ganymede," he ordered. "We'll use its gravity to accelerate on the approach, then hit them from behind." The crew worked smoothly, guiding the ship into position. Frank had drilled them relentlessly, turning a group of former Air Force pilots, Navy officers, and civilian engineers into a space combat crew. "In position," his navigation officer announced. "Begin attack run," Frank ordered. The Defiance shot out from behind Ganymede, its engines burning hot as it raced toward the unsuspecting Void ships. By the time they detected the approaching Earth vessel, it was too late. Frank's ship fired its main weapons directly at the weak points Dr. Clark had identified. The first Void ship exploded immediately. The second managed to turn but took heavy damage before it could raise its defenses. The third began to flee. "All weapons on the fleeing ship," Frank ordered. "Don't let it report back." 3 minutes later, all 3 Void ships were destroyed. The Defiance had suffered only minor damage. "Search the debris," Frank instructed. "I want anything we can salvage for Dr. Clark to study." As his crew worked, Frank received a transmission from Jack Bennett. "The main Void fleet has changed course," Jack said without preamble. "They're now heading directly for Earth, and they'll arrive sooner than we thought. Kilvax believes they see us as a greater threat after our victory here." "How soon?" Frank asked. 5 days. Maybe less." Frank looked out at the floating wreckage of the Void ships they had just destroyed. "We'll need every advantage we can get. The Confederation is sending reinforcements," Jack said, "but they won't arrive in time. When the main fleet comes, it will be Earth ships on the front line." Frank nodded grimly. "We'll be ready." Across the solar system, human ships prepared for battle. On Earth, civilians worked around the clock to build defenses. In laboratories, scientists studied captured Void technology, searching for weaknesses. The species that the Confederation had dismissed as primitive was now the front line in a war for the galaxy's survival. And despite the odds, Frank felt a fierce pride. Humans had always been at their best when backed into a corner. The Void was about to learn that lesson the hard way. The main Void fleet arrived exactly as predicted, emerging from the darkness of space beyond Pluto's orbit. Over 100 ships, each larger than anything humanity had ever built, moved with frightening purpose toward Earth. In the White House, Situation Room, President Laura Blackwell studied the holographic display showing the approaching enemy. 6 days ago, she had been dealing with economic reforms and climate restoration projects. Now she was leading humanity in its first interstellar war. The combined fleet is in position, General Richard Summers reported. A career military man with a brilliant strategic mind, he had been chosen to coordinate Earth's defense forces. 43 Earth ships and 27 Confederation vessels. 70 ships against over 100, the president said quietly. Quality over quantity, General Summers replied with a thin smile. Our ships have been upgraded with Dr. Clark's latest weapons systems, and Captain Miller's tactics from Jupiter have been distributed to all commanders. President Blackwell nodded. Since the first battle, Earth and Confederation scientists had worked together around the clock, combining their technologies in ways neither had imagined before. The shields on Earth's ships were now twice as strong, and their weapons had been modified to target the Void's specific weaknesses. The Confederation Council is hailing us, an aide announced. The holographic display shifted to show High Council member Vin Tech, one of the most senior leaders in the Confederation. His aged face looked solemn. President Blackwell, I wish to speak with you before the battle begins. I'm listening, she replied. The decisions we made regarding Earth, classifying you as a Tier 7 species, withholding technology, dismissing your potential, these were grievous errors. The old alien seemed genuinely remorseful. If we survive this day, the Confederation wishes to formally extend an invitation for Earth to join as a full member world. The room fell silent. 5 years of being treated as irrelevant. And now this, complete reversal. We appreciate the offer, President Blackwell said carefully. But perhaps we should focus on surviving the day first. Indeed, Vintech agreed. Our analysts have reviewed General Summers' battle plan. It is unconventional by our standards, but we have agreed to follow his leadership in this engagement. The president glanced at General Summers, who stood a little straighter at this acknowledgement. Good luck to us all, she said. In orbit above Earth, the EDF Phoenix floated alongside the Confederation flagship. On its bridge, Jack Bennett and Admiral Hayes stood with Grand Marshal Kilvax, watching as the Void fleet approached. They're forming a standard attack pattern, Kilvax observed. 3 waves, with their largest ships protected in the center. Perfect, Jack said. They're doing exactly what General Summers predicted. Over the past 5 days, they had studied every record of the Void's previous battles, looking for patterns in their tactics. The Confederation commanders had been frustrated by what they saw as the Void's chaotic and unpredictable approaches. But General Summers had seen something different. Not chaos, but a rigid adherence to complex but repeatable patterns. All ships, prepare to execute Operation Trojan, Admiral Hayes ordered. The combined fleet began to move, but not toward the oncoming enemy. Instead, they retreated toward Mars, appearing to abandon Earth. They're taking the bait, Jack said, as the Void fleet adjusted course, splitting into smaller groups to pursue what they perceived as fleeing defenders. Now, Admiral Hayes commanded. From behind the dark side of the moon, 20 Earth ships that had been hiding in radio silence emerged, racing toward the Void's now exposed command ships. At the same time, the retreating fleet suddenly reversed course, trapping the pursuing enemy between 2 forces. The battle erupted with a fury that lit up the space around Earth. The Void ships fought back fiercely, but their formation had been broken. For the first time, they seemed confused. On the Defiance, Captain Frank Miller led his squadron straight for the largest Void vessel. Target their propulsion connectors, he ordered. Just like we practiced, his ships fired in perfect synchronization, their modified weapons striking precisely at the weak points Dr. Clark had identified. The massive Void ship shuddered, then began to break apart. Keep moving, Frank shouted as enemy fire intensified around them. Don't give them time to adapt. The battle raged for hours. Earth ships, though taking heavy damage, moved with a speed and unpredictability that the Void could not match. The Confederation vessels, following General Summers' strategy, supported the human attacks with precise, coordinated strikes. On Earth, in the hardened bunker beneath Boston that had become her new laboratory, Dr. Susan Clark worked frantically, with her team. Kate Foster stood beside her. Both women focused on the monitor showing a simulation of the Void flagship's energy systems. "There," Kate said suddenly, pointing to a fluctuation pattern. "That's the resonance frequency." Susan nodded and began typing rapidly. "If we can match it exactly, then reverse it. It would create a cascade failure through their entire system," Kate finished. Susan opened a communication channel to Jack Bennett. "We have something. A way to take down their flagship, but we need to get a transmitter within close range." "How close?" Jack asked. 500 meters. Jack was silent for a moment. "That's practically a suicide mission." "I'll go," came a voice. From behind him. Jack turned to see Zex Lorax. "My ship is small and fast enough." "No," Jack said. "I'll do it." Before anyone could argue, he was already heading for the hangar bay where a small shuttle waited. As he prepared for launch, Lisa Winters' voice came over his communicator. "Jack, be careful." "Always am," he replied with a forced lightness he didn't feel. The shuttle launched, racing away from the Phoenix toward the massive Void flagship. Enemy fire immediately focused on him, but the shuttle's small size made it difficult to hit. 500 meters in closing, Jack reported. Activating the transmitter now. The device Susan and Kate had designed sent out a precise frequency that matched the Void ship's energy pattern, then inverted it. For a moment, nothing happened. Then, like a wave spreading across its surface, the flagship began to shudder. "It's working," Jack exclaimed. But his celebration was cut short as his shuttle was hit by debris. "I've lost control. Going to try to get clear before—" His transmission cut off as the shuttle tumbled toward the failing Void ship. "Jack," Lisa cried from the command center on Earth. Everyone watched in horror as the Void flagship began to collapse in on itself, creating a swirling vortex of energy that pulled in nearby ships. Then, at the last moment, a small object shot away from the destruction. Jack's shuttle, badly damaged but still intact. "This is Bennett." His voice crackled over the comm. "Could use a pickup." A cheer went up across the combined fleet. Without their flagship and with their forces in disarray, the remaining Void ships began to retreat. Some self-destructed, rather, than flee. 2 days later, in a ceremony aboard the Phoenix, President Blackwell stood facing High Council member Vintek. Representatives from both species watched as they signed a formal alliance treaty. "Today marks a new chapter for both our peoples," Vintek announced. "Earth is hereby recognized as a Tier 2 civilization with full rights and privileges within the Confederation." President Blackwell accepted the document but added, "We look forward to working with the Confederation as equals. The days of being ignored are behind us." In the crowd, Jack Bennett stood with Lisa Winters, watching as humans and aliens mingled, with new respect. Dr. Parker was deep in conversation with a Confederation scientist about medical technologies. Kate Foster was showing Zex Lorax the designs for Earth's new defense grid. "What happens now?" Lisa asked. "We rebuild," Jack said. "We explore. We make sure no one underestimates humanity again." Outside the viewport, Earth shone blue and green against the blackness of space, a planet once deemed insignificant that had now helped save the galaxy. The war wasn't over, but for the first time Jack felt certain they would win. Because when humans were backed into a corner, they didn't just fight. They changed the rules of the game entirely, and that was something the Void, for all its power, could never understand.